Good morning, everyone. This is Christy Wake from the Center for Faculty Excellence. Welcome to Meeting Students Where They Are and Taking Them Where They Need to Be, Strategies to Enhance Student Skills. This was a presentation from the last faculty meeting session in National Harbor, Maryland, that we have converted to webinar format for you. And the presenters today, we have Alan Sedman, Core Faculty Research and Residency in the Richard W. Riley College of Education and Leadership. We have Angela Witt-Pren, Core Faculty Public Health, School of Health Sciences, College of Health Sciences. And Laurel Walsh, General Education Coordinator, College of Undergraduate Studies. Before I hand things over to them, I do want to go through a few housekeeping items with you. Some of you may have been in an Adobe Connect webinar before, but for those of you that haven't, I'll just go through some of the different things that you should be seeing on your screen. So you should see a main pod that has our PowerPoint right there in the middle for you. That's going to be where all the action is taking place. We also have a few different pods along the side for you. I realize the layout that you're seeing is a little bit different from the one in the screenshot. You have an attendee pod to the right side, and that's just listing everyone that's in this meeting room. You also have a closed captioning pod in the upper left, and that's a live feed. And then you have the chat pod in the bottom left. And feel free to use that if you want to share comments or questions. All throughout the session, we'll be monitoring that and getting back to people. We don't have a Q&A pod during this session, so you don't have to worry about that one. You do have another option to participate as well. In addition to that chat pod, you can raise your hand. There's a little guy, looks like he's raising his hand. It's a button along the top of your screen there. If you click on that, it'll put that symbol next to your name in the attendee pod, and we'll be able to unmute you. If you click it again, it puts your hand down. And you'll notice there is a drop-down button associated with that, and you've got a few different options there you can see on the screen if you need to tell us to speak up, or if we're too loud, speak softer, that sort of thing. And lastly, if you are having any technical difficulties with Adobe during this session, I would recommend to you to click the Help button in the top right corner of your screen. It's going to take you to the Adobe Connect FAQ site, and they have a lot of really helpful information there. I think you're most likely going to find the answer that you need there, so feel free to use that as needed. And without further ado, I'll go ahead and hand things over to Alan.
Thank you very much, Christy, and I would like to thank the Center for Faculty Excellence for hosting this webinar. On behalf of Angela, Laurel, and myself, we'd like to really thank all of you for coming today. We feel that this is a very important topic, and it has been presented twice, once in January and then in July at the faculty meeting, and we have had webinar follow-ups. And what we'll be presenting today is a lot of what we found from the follow-up webinars we saw as something that could help you as faculty members grading students and working with students where they are and meeting them where they are. We're going to be discussing today what it means to meet where a student is, and we're going to be talking about it by degree levels, although I think with the paradigm that we came up with, it really will apply to all of the areas, the bachelor's, master's, and the doctorate. We want to really start to consider how to get students where they need to be professionally, academically, and I would like to even add one and say personally. Because not only do they work in a professional setting with us, and we're working with them academically, a lot of them have a lot of personal goals, obviously to get their degree, either the bachelor's, master's, or doctorate, but they also might have some personal goals of where they want to go and use these degrees. Obviously, because of Walden's social change mission, we hope that they will apply it to that. We want to encourage you to ask questions throughout by typing them in, and because some of the information you'll be receiving might warrant that. Some of the issues that we went over previously with our other webinars and at the faculty members was we were talking about the flexibility of grades within the rubric structure. I remember when I first started at Walden and we didn't really have rubrics, it was a little difficult, and that was back in the 2004. It was a little difficult trying to judge where students were. And when the rubric was developed and instituted in all courses, I found it a lot easier, and this is my opinion, to be able to grade students. But I do know that a lot of faculty members don't understand the actual flexibility that we do have within grading using rubrics. We're going to be talking about some of the grading struggling students. We all have them because Walden, as you know, has the philosophy of giving students the opportunity to succeed. We don't screen them out up front, and what we do is we kind of screen them and work with them throughout their career here at Walden. So we've all experienced those struggling students, and we want to really talk about also how do you grade them, how do you work with them. And of course, grading culturally diverse students. Gee, I remember starting out at Walden almost having exclusively students from the United States, and then starting to get one or two students maybe from a Caribbean country. And now I've had students in some of my classes from China, Japan, Guam, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, all over with different cultures, different backgrounds. It makes for a really nice, diverse student experience for some of our native students, but there are also some grading diversity that we need to talk about. And of course, the role of student effort in grading. How do we grade on effort? A student puts through a very, let's say, masterful determination of some of their work, and do we grade it on effort or do we grade it according to the rubric?
Okay, thank you, Alan. So those are some of the issues that we talked about with faculty when we met in January, in particular in person and as well over the webinars in the spring. And so we wanted to tell you a little bit, give you a little bit of background of the previous discussions that we've had around these issues. And these, the summary here on the next two slides are really the words of the faculty we met with in January and March, and their perspectives around the issues that Alan outlined. So one of the things we heard a lot in the discussions was that it was evident there was a big variation in grading, both within the rubric, or should I say within the rubric, within the course, within the program, between courses, between faculty, any which way you would cut it, there was a lot of variation in how we grade students. And this variation reflected the different views of the purpose of the rubric. So there were many different ways of looking at how the rubric should be used and what it actually stood for. We had people talk about the difference between grading and feedback, for example, and talking about how while the rubric in some programs is really good to give a grading structure, it doesn't provide a good platform for feedback. In other programs, there was a more explicit platform for feedback built in along with the grading. Regardless of how the individual rubrics in the programs and the courses were designed, there was definitely a feeling or a consensus that feedback and grading needed to reflect student skills accurately. And some faculty felt the rubrics in their programs did that better than others. There was also a lot of discussion around the resources that need to be available for the students. As Ellen pointed out, we have students who come in sometimes without some of the skills that they need to be successful, and having those resources be available from all different departments within Walden and all different centers was really an important key priority, I guess, for the faculty. It would be the best word. So the other thing, at the end of the day, everyone agreed that quality graduates are important, and that grading and feedback needed to be able to help students develop their skills so that they could graduate with a quality understanding of what their degree meant and be prepared for the professional workforce. The other pieces of the discussions were that there was a big difference, especially in January when we met in person. We saw a big difference among faculty as to the purpose of the rubric. There were quite a few faculty who felt the rubrics were more guidelines for how to grade, where other faculty felt it was a very strict assessment tool and should be used basically to the letter. So there are a lot of different philosophies around the rubric. They talked about how rubrics help identify students for interventions and help assure quality, but they certainly can't reflect all aspects of grading or student accomplishments. So a lot of nuance around how rubrics were used within different courses, programs, and for different purposes by different faculty. Almost everyone agreed that time management is a real issue for our students, given that we cater to working professionals much of the time, and that is something we, as faculty, continue to work on helping our students with in terms of finding ways, coping strategies for them. We also acknowledged in our discussions that there's only so much as faculty we can do with that issue. We talked a little bit about the differing opinions of the value of plus and minus grades. As you know, Walden doesn't give plus and minus grades. Currently, we talked a little bit about whether or not that would be useful, and if so, why. And then the reality that oftentimes we try to grade students objectively, but we all know that some subjectivity comes into play, particularly around student effort. And sometimes the student who really shows the effort, there may be a subjective component to how we grade that student, given our perception of their effort. And is that something that should be there? Should it not be there? Should that be a part of the rubric at all? Those were all discussions that we had. So that's sort of the background. That's what's going on so far. And that's what's helped Alan and Laurel, I, and others develop sort of what the next step of thinking around these issues are. So I'm going to pass it over to Laurel at this point.
Before you do that, I just wanted to mention something. This is Alan again, and this has been an evolutionary process for us and we hope, for Walden University, on how we started very general, got a lot of input from faculty at our two faculty presentations at faculty meetings, and then through our webinars. So this has been something that has been ongoing for the last year, and we hope that we've come up with something that will really help faculty be able to work with all their students.
Thank you for that. Yes, and thank you both for setting it up so well. This is a really complex topic. I think the use of rubrics and grading and meeting students where they're at is something that's often, discussed about for all of us in a very general way, but very infrequently explicitly. How can we do this? So I think it's the next slide that starts to frame that out. Am I supposed to be forward? Sure, that'd be me. So when we started having this conversation, very quickly we would find ourselves saying, well, for doctoral students, this is a certain standard that we know they have to be at to get to where they can craft a capstone. Well, what does that mean at the master's level when the capstone product's less intensive, and then again more so at the undergraduate level? What does it mean to meet students where they're at when they're prior learning is so varied, and there's so many different skills that they're bringing into the classroom that might not be easily accessed. So one of the things that we started to think about was, how are those connections made to the students where they're at and where we need them to be? What tools do we have? And a lot of them came around of best practices for online instruction, which is, anchoring feedback in a student draft at the moment where the student's experiencing that insight, understanding the use of rubrics and the feedback we can give inside of a rubric through, points, and also in the comment section there. Helping our students deal with the many different novelties that they encounter online. We have online students who are experienced scholarly academic students, but they've never done online learning. So they have new competencies that they have to tap into. Technology, navigating Blackboard, uploading, using Turnitin, deciphering the kind of readouts they're receiving from different technology tools. These can cause a student to falter when they're really, it's actually a technology woe, but it can look like they have skills that they need to find yet. So how do we help nurture new competencies that all students struggle in when they're first presented with them? And then what foundational skills are essential for students to gain momentum and get them into higher order thinking? It's all well and good to concentrate on commas and semicolons and to be really concerned about APA citation, but how do these foster strong quiz and questioning thinking skills? And how does that encourage students to be autonomous problem solvers? That's where we want them to be. So we recognize sometimes when we introduce a new complexity, other skills can fall to the wayside. A student who previously was really good at paragraphing and had strong thesis statements was introduced to a new set of complex synthesis that he had to do with literature. That's going to make other parts of the draft maybe less proficient than they had been in the past. That happens just the same way for undergraduate students. They encounter academic writing, and it's really a foreign language. When all of us first started to read and write in a scholarly voice, it felt awkward. It's not something that all of us are really comfortable with citing. This whole concept of by degree level works across. It slices us down the middle and helps us understand that we're all trying to do the exact same thing, become more gifted and articulate and fluent in academic writing, and that when we master these skills, the previous skills seem really self-evident, but it takes a while to get there.
Laurel, this is Alan. Before you get to that, I just wanted to comment a little on the last slide. And, I grew up before the computer age, which maybe some of the others who are listening to this. And I always thought that our students would have mastered the computers and all the intricacies that we have with Blackboard and other types of skills. But I have found, believe it or not, that a lot of the younger students really haven't. And it's almost something that we have to teach them along with the academic writing and the cognitive skills and that sort of thing.
Yeah, especially so. Our undergraduate students, I teach the first term course. That's really true when they're coming into Blackboard for the first time. Lots of places to get confused. And this lovely acronym was brought to us. Sherry Jorson attended both the sessions that led to this one, and she had kind of an aha moment when she was processing some of the discussions that we experienced together as a group at the faculty meetings. And she shared this with Eric Rydell and me and Angie and Alan, and we thought, man, that's a really neat thing to stem up out of these conversations where faculty were expressing their aspirational intentions with the rubric, how we really hope to meet students where they're at, and yet we sometimes feel that the tools that we're given might not quite be enough. So this was sort of a bridge slogan that came to her that she shared with us that we wanted to share with all of you. And I'm not gonna read these through to you, but I'm gonna ask you to start to, as you're reading them yourself, thinking specifically of students you've worked with where these things might have been true. And I also want to put a caveat out there. When we brought this list to our faculty, man, there was a lot of discussion about how these live in the real world, and phrases like constructive became a bigger conversation. What do we mean by that? that? How do we prove that? How do we know that our feedback is constructive? And some of us wanted to wordsmith. By the end of the meeting, we had people bringing us the list, and they'd taken an adjective out, or never give up on a student. They had reframed it and rephrased it to make it more true in their own professional life. So as you look at this list, we're really looking for you to be part of that bigger conversation that we've been having. Clearly an inspirational conversation if you look at Sherry's bridging work here. But Angie, Alan, would you like to kind of give some more input, or if there's a couple of these that you'd really like to highlight for discussion to get the conversation going?
This is Alan. Yes, I would like to try to get feedback from the participants on each of these areas. The first one, be specific in expressing expectations. How do we express our expectations to our students? I know that I present mine with something in writing to tell them what I expect of them throughout a course. And of course we have the course syllabus, which I doubt any of the students read, or if they do read it, they gloss over it. How do you as participants express expectations to students, if at all? And do you think it's necessary?
And this is Christy. In answering Alan's question, please feel free to use that chat pod down in the bottom left. And if you'd rather just be unmuted and share your thoughts that way, then go ahead and raise your hand and I can do that for you.
I used to work for someone that said that the first question or the first response to a question is the hardest. So I'll ask you, who wants to give the second response?
Looks like we've got one person typing. There we go. So, Alan, this is a response for you through emails, weekly announcements, and feedback on application assignments.
My question then to Dorsis would be, and I hope I pronounced that right, do you think that's too late? Do you think that expectations, I know throughout the course is very good, but does anybody think that expectations should be given before the course? We have our list of students and our courses we're going to teach about a week before, and we know that students then will log in the Friday before the Monday of the start. Should we be giving them information prior to? And then, of course, during. What are your thoughts on that, group?
I would like to even expand on that a little bit by asking, should we, what are the expectations we express when they join the program, for example? Are there programs that explicitly, outline for the students exactly what they're going to be learning along the way and what they're expected to know by the end, rather than just having it in a document, having it be some sort of part of how the students are introduced to the program?
Amber Cook from the Writing Centers wrote into the Q&A box, students ask us a lot for annotated samples, annotations that explain why a response or a paper was successful. I know faculty members have differing thoughts on the wisdom of samples or models, though. I think that's a really interesting question. I think students are always looking to see what is it that is an A paper, why was this paper a B paper, and so forth. I don't know that we do a really good job of saying, well, here's the difference, student, in a student paper. Here's an A, here's a B for you to consider. And I think in part there's a concern that that might bring in some opportunities for plagiarism. I will note that in the Humanities 1001 course, the primary way that we all got comfortable with the curriculum, training our new foundations or first-term faculty, was to do the assignments. We actually did the assignments that we were asking our students to do to give us some exemplars that we could share with students. And students did ask, hey, I'd like to know what a really quality paper would look like for week 6 and so forth. And we were using and are using exemplars in that course.
Does anybody see that students are, even now in graduate and master's, doctors, or even an undergraduate, very grade conscious, even though we know that no employers really look at the transcripts?
And while you're thinking about that, I see Hillary Wentworth typed in the chat pod that it's challenging to know whether or not your students are reading the emails that you send out. I wonder if our presenters have any thoughts on that.
Well, you know what I would like to say to that, and Hillary, that is absolutely right on the money. I wonder if we embedded the video and even a chat in it where they can, the email comes up where they push a button and it comes out in verbally. I'm one for trying to work with students with their different learning styles. And we can really do that in our courses if we had them all on, some of them on video, some of them on audio, and then of course, they're looking at them. Tactile is going to be a real tough one. But I think that's one way that we could overcome it is by sending them a voice.
I think email fatigue is a real issue at every grade level, and I think it's almost the worst at the beginning of a student's life cycle with us when they're getting so much information from financial aid and other Walden resources. I think we can get lost, but I think my first-term faculty have done a really amazing job doing a lot of Jing videos, doing guided tours of the classroom. So you're sort of like, come with me, let's see this classroom together. And you're sort of, in here, we have our academic writing expectations. Don't be afraid to click on this button. That kind of sort of a fun, try to be upbeat about the fact that Blackboard is not necessarily intuitive if you're not used to using stems and drop-down menus. If you have a browser compatibility issue, you can really get lost. We find that Mac users frequently encounter problems with the Blackboard interface. So just being mindful, I think, as faculty, when students are expressing, I was late with this paper because I was having a lot of technology glitches, I think that's become the modern, a dog ate my homework, and we sort of think, oh, well, but remember back to when you first started grading online or doing your Blackboard interactions, you might have encountered some frustrations. It's good to keep those in mind when our students are presenting with that kind of an issue with posting on time.
Angela, that was excellent, and especially in their first two courses. Once they start going down the line and getting into the third and fourth one, we have other types of higher expectations for them with the technology, I would think. I see that Dorcas has also said, and this is interesting, I think it depends where the students are in the program. I teach students that are at the end of their program, yet they still have many of these academic challenges. And that might even go into the second one where we said, remember that perfection is not the goal, or improvement is a gradual process. What do you think of that?
Well, I think one of the things that we got a lot of questions about when we gave this material, presented this material, was the different students need different communication. And what nice vague adjectives we've used there, different and different, because that just kind of lets you kind of get around that. But I really think one of the difficulties of meeting students where they're at is to model real, communication excellence, to have, let yourself be yourself in the discussion boards, being really open with students and looking for opportunities to connect with our adult students and talk to them in new ways. Anybody in residencies knows what a delight it is to actually get to meet our students face to face. But for undergraduate students, they really don't have as many opportunities to get face time with their faculty. And so when they have a faculty member who's willing to engage in some back-to-back conversation with them over email, banter about a sports team, or just an exchange about parenting, that's what we really mean. You know, different students need different types of communication, different frequency of communication. I think all of us as faculty have sort of what we refer to as in our minds our frequent flyers. I know in the Writing Center we would have students who really maintain a high degree of contact with us. That kind of outreach can seem like, well, it's not kind of fair, almost in keeping with my other students who also deserve my full attention and my help. We talked a lot about, you know, what does that mean? What does that look like? How do we help students who require differing degrees of what some people think of as hand-holding, but I think of as providing a high-touch environment in an asynchronous space? But, you know, how do we measure and show value to making those sorts of outreach and communication? I'd love to hear from you guys about the ways that you vary and are nimble in your communication based on the individual who needs, you know, outreach.
Don't be afraid to raise your hand if you'd like to chime in on that.
How about the use of video chats? I'm wondering how many people are comfortable sitting in front of their computer and chatting with the student face to face. It's so much, it almost seems so much easier now when I can't see Amber or Jane or Rich or Hillary, but if we were looking at each other and talking with each other, would that make a difference?
You know, one of the things that we talked about in January a little bit was the issue of having very culturally diverse students, and certainly the cultural diversity of Walden students has increased exponentially over the last couple of 3 years. And I know when we talked in July as well, the different students need different communication. You know, some of the conversation was around meeting sort of some of the needs of students that differ based on the cultural backgrounds, and trying to figure out the most efficient way to help students to where they need to be given this diversity of our students. And I'd love to hear if people's experiences with that or things that have worked for them in terms of getting students to where they need to be. Oh, Amber.
Thanks, Amber. Oh, Amber. Yep. Go ahead, Amber.
Oh, did you? Oh, were you just unmuted? Fabulous.
Oh, no. I was just, this is Christy. I was just going to read what Amber had typed in, but it looks like you're on it, so I'll let you handle that.
Yeah, well, I agree with Amber wholeheartedly in the sense that I've often had, I shouldn't say I've often had, I've sometimes had students who I've talked with on the phone, and they can communicate with me very well in terms of their understanding in a verbal way. But when it comes to writing, they cannot get what's in their head down on paper in the same way that they can talk about it. And people are, you know, people's preferred methods of communication are very different, and that can really be a struggle for some students. So to the extent that we have techniques that can help students translate that, I think that would be really great. And I'd love to hear our participants' views on this or experiences with this.
I just wanted to make sure that we read out loud Amber's comment, which I think is really helpful for framing this. She said, "To me, it's more about the audio than the video. By making poor writers communicate to us in their weakest medium, we don't always know what problems are concept-related and which are writing-related." And that's a really tricky problem, I think, for most of us in any of the content areas, is separating out the demonstration of mastery of a concept and the writing glitches that might impede, our understanding of a sentence. It's hard to display mastery without simultaneously displaying sentence level and structure in English. So I think this is really, anybody who's worked with multilingual students will say that there's sometimes the concept mastery is there. It's just the language isn't, where it needs to be. An article missing can make the sentence scan wrong, but the whole idea development can be there. So love to know what pointers you have really related to that, separating out concept-related issues to writing-related issues.
Okay, this is Alan. I'll ask a question about the bridging concept in general. We have this acronym, bridging, helping students where they need to be, and we've identified different sentences for each of those letters. And what's your feedback on that? Do you think that this is something that faculty need to see? Do you think it's helpful for them? Do you think we should just drop it?
We're really looking for some input here. I see that Hillary is typing in. Thank you, Hillary. It'd be really great if we could hear from others of you that haven't chimed in the chat. Again, raise your hand if you'd like to contribute that way, if you feel more comfortable with that. This is really a webinar that is centered around a lot of discussion, so we encourage you to share your thoughts with us. There's no right or wrong answer here.
Hillary, I can so appreciate about giving encouragement and sometimes forgetting that piece of the puzzle. I know that I also sometimes get lost in looking for errors, and you can get so focused on one piece of the grading and looking, assessing points off as opposed to looking for the positive that students are doing. And I know sometimes I have to step away from my desk, give myself a timeout, and then come back to it so that I make sure that the feedback I'm giving is very constructive and not anything else. So thank you for that. I resonate with that a lot.
Well, while the others are typing, I find it, very challenging, and to continually give that encouragement to students and continually show them what they need to do, but also to encourage them and show them what they are doing right. Constructive feedback to a class of 25, 26 is a lot of students to work with, and I know that some faculty are teaching more than one class.
It looks like we have a couple more ideas here. Thank you guys. Lydia, the notion of gains and setbacks is something it seems useful to emphasize both to faculty and to the students themselves. Messing up is often a valuable part of the process, especially when developing a capstone, for example. Thoughts on that?
I think that's very important with the gains and setbacks. This is Alan speaking. And I hate to see students when they first start out in a course, because I saw what Stephen wrote on the 6th week, that they should be a stronger student, is some of them come in with the expectation that they have perfection. Students going for some of the advanced degrees, when 1.9% of the U.S. population of over 300 million have earned doctoral degrees, a lot of them feel they're perfect. They've gotten great grades throughout their undergraduate career, their graduate career, and then all of a sudden they're in and getting feedback from faculty that they need to do X, Y, and Z, and also to discover that scholarly voice. That's something that I find some students hard to grasp.
Well, I think, especially when it comes to writing the lit review, in a capstone, it's so important that students go through the stage of having a pile of summary, which seems to be what happens first. They'll summarize all the articles. They'll even sometimes put them in clumps that are sort of related, but they haven't gone that next step and really synthesized in the context of their academic investigation. And so what they'll see as a setback is actually just a natural progression. They really need to get to that point before they can go to have that synthesizing element. And instead of framing it around, wow, this is just all summary, sometimes you have to remember that this is an essential component, and kind of reframing what can be perceived as really a step back as part of a natural cognitive development of understanding, that this precedes that. And the other thing about a high volume of writing courses, some of our 6-week courses at the undergraduate, where, as Stephen noted, our religion course, you're writing 2 full essays a week, and then that culminates towards 6 weeks of having done this. When you do that much writing, it is wonderful to see the arc of growth that occurs, because good feedback in writing does present an opportunity for that kind of escalation. I think some of our courses, by design, would benefit from demonstrating knowledge not always in writing. For example, if we had a paper, that would be juxtaposed by an opportunity to do something that is more visual, or maybe a short video blog or something along those lines, where the student isn't being, once again, subject mastery is not always demonstrated in writing, that we see other ways of display casing that knowledge. Good stuff to think about.
Something that occurs to me, Laurel, as you were talking, was that a lot of the ideas and thinking we've talked about lately about different ways of getting, giving feedback, different ways of getting student assignments. This sort of the multimedia approach was something we couldn't even consider a couple of years ago. So the advancement in the technology is so closely tied to how we are able to interact with our students and have them interact with us on a regular basis, and how we assess their progress and how we give feedback. And I just sort of wanted to state that explicitly, because I think it really affects how we take this concept and move forward.
Wait for 5-6 years from now when students will get their feedback from us in holograms. That'll be very interesting if that ever happens. But you're absolutely right. It's very hard I find it hard through the online grading and education to judge a student on how they like to receive feedback, either through a chat, getting together with them, calling them, or through the written word. So it really varies, and judgments on how students receive it better or best is a difficult situation for some.
Okay, are there any other questions that Alan, Angie, or Laurel, you guys wanted to pose on this bridging concept?
Just one. Sorry, we just had a question about APA compliance, and do we scaffold, do we bridge through the APA? At the undergraduate level, we do have really explicit kind of outlines about APA, and we really are asking faculty teaching 1,000 level courses to not take points off for APA compliance in documents, more so to use those as teachable moments about using the words and ideas of others, and we want them to cite their sources, but at 1,000 level, if they're not perfect with their APA, that's not such a big concern. But the documents that live in all the undergraduate classrooms, the AW documents, academic writing expectations, they're really, really clear and have hyperlinks to all the APA issues that are assessed at 2,000, 3,000, and capstone level. So if you're an undergraduate faculty member, if you go in your classroom, they'll be there at a glance, shows what the scaffolding is from 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 to capstone, but those are really pretty clear about APA. So thanks for that question.
And of course, at the doctoral level, APA is our standard, and it behooves us not to grade for APA because that's where they're going to be working with their capstone courses and in all of their types of documents and writing that they present to us throughout their doctoral studies.
Okay, any other questions from the group?
Christy, my main question still remains. Do people feel that this bridging concept is valuable and should be something that is presented or given out to faculty?
All right, Lillian says, I think it would be very valuable for all faculty to be made aware of, and it looks like we've got another person typing in. Another couple people typing in. I second that. Yes, it's clear and articulate.
And this, I want to tell the participants, is something that came about after 1-2 presentations at faculty meetings and after 4 webinars. So, we appreciate your feedback, and we're trying to get something that is easy to understand and would be valuable for faculty. That's why I asked that.
I should state also we are very open to improving it or modifying it based on ideas and concepts that faculty feel really should be in here. So so don't be afraid to critique it either.
I very much appreciate your feedback on this for everybody who has written in about it so far. And that's something that, as I said, we've been working very diligently on, and we're trying to get something that we hope will be generalized for most of the faculty from undergraduate through the graduate program.
It looks like Hillary's going to be our graphic designer. She's already got the picture in her head.
Yeah, that would be pretty neat, actually.
Oh, great, Stephen. It's good to know that you were one of the attendees at the January meeting. I'm actually happy to hear that somebody who was a part of those initial discussions has sort of come back to see the next round and thinks that what we've come up with is reasonable. given our conversations in January. So thank you for that.
All right. Is there anything else you'd like to address with this concept, Alan, Angie, or Laurel? Got about 9 minutes left of our time today.
I think the next slide has all of our contact information. If later, which seems to be when all my good ideas come upon me, I think, hey, I wish I'd asked those guys about this or that or the other thing. Feel free to reach out to all of us. Alan, kind of was ad hoc doctoral point of contact. Angela's experience with masters, and then I'm the undergrad guy. If you have any kind of questions that fall outside of degree level and just curious about our thoughts on something, please follow up with us. We, as Angie noted, this is a work in progress, and we really want people's feedback and their insights on it. So thank you all for joining us.
And just to let everyone know, I will send a follow-up email after the session, so you'll have a copy of the PowerPoint that was used, and you'll also have a link to the recording because we did record today's session. We are offering a second session as well, and I'll include the date and time and registration information for that, so certainly pass that along to any of your colleagues you think would be interested in attending. And I'll just second what Laurel said. Thanks everyone for attending today, and we hope to see you in another CFE webinar soon.